The corridors of Oxford lead to power.
When I left Oxford, I was ready to do many of the things I've gone on to do in life, in government.
This is a university of the country's elite.
I was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
I have plenty of global networks and contacts.
Now these faces from frontline politics have returned, with their eyes on being elected the university's next Chancellor. Just as higher education faces a split over free speech and finance.
Increasing the fee cap has not been an easy decision.
After the government raised tuition fees, today the Office for Students warned that without further investment, 3 out of 4 universities would be in the red. Will Oxford's next Chancellor support the costs falling on students or the public?
I came from a background where my university fees were paid by the government. I would not have been able to get to university if it hadn't been the case, so it would be hypocritical of me to say that it's fine for tuition fees to increase, because the people who come to university are industrialists, they're scientists of the future. They will produce wealth for the country, so therefore it's an investment which I think is worthwhile.
Lady Ailish Angelini is an Oxford principal who chaired the Sarah Everard inquiry and is the only non-partisan candidate on the shortlist. Dr. Margaret Casely Hayford is a fellow and former university chancellor who failed to make the list. Do you feel the system is currently biased towards career politicians?
Politicians have a lot of continuing profile, but they also do have the machinery behind them that helps them to lobby in the right way. It's been over 800 years and this organisation still hasn't had a woman in the role of Chancellor. So technically it is the oldest glass ceiling in the world if you don't count the major religions.
Do you feel like an part of the establishment? Do you feel like an outsider?
I don't always feel part of the establishment. I talk to my students all the time about imposter syndrome. I'm in various situations, I'm sitting there or standing there thinking, oh my God, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. And I think, get a grip, girl.
Oxford has never had a female chancellor. The 2 women still in the running have working class backgrounds, but diverge on fees.
The cost of educating a young person here is nearly 3 times as much as the tuition fees. Okay, so there's a huge gap there.
Universities UK say that tuition fees to fill the funding gap should be at least £12,500.
I think that a lot of other things need to be combined with such a rise in tuition fees.
So you do believe that tuition fees do have to rise though?
They do have to rise, and they are rising, but rising for 1 year. But then I think we need a package, and I don't know what else will be in that package, because I wouldn't want it all to fall on the shoulders of the students here.
Lord Mandelson commissioned the last major review of university funding that recommended tuition fees should be uncapped.
The truth is that Oxford is not struggling to survive after 800 years of its existence. The struggle is something different. It's a struggle to compete globally against, in particular, massively funded, much richer American universities. Now, the taxpayer is not going to give us the means to compete on that scale with American universities. That's why we're going to have to find whole new scales and sources of philanthropy.
Oxford and Cambridge face different challenges to most UK universities. Multi-billion-pound endowments protect them from funding challenges, but their status make them vulnerable to cultural disputes. From the Gaza protests to concern over who is allowed a platform, and the calls to remove the statue of Cecil Rhodes.
I simply can't see what is achieved by some symbolic act of taking a statue off the facade. And what you do then find, and it's become very apparent with this type of campaign, is that as people press, you get the opposite response. And then you create culture wars where, quite frankly, I just don't think they're useful or necessary.
Do you think that Oxford has become engulfed in culture wars?
Relatively speaking, no, I don't. There was student protest when I was there in 1975. There was plenty of that. So there's nothing new about this, and young people are going to protest, and there are going to be strongly held views. But do I think that Oxford has been taken over by culture wars? That's not my impression at all, and I think it's actually managed some of the issues of the last 12 months perfectly reasonably and well.
What do you make of the big debate at the moment that Oxford is no longer a space for free speech?
Well, there are some things that are against the law. You know, there are forms of discrimination that are rightly against the law. In a university, you should come to hear different points of view, to debate the great issues of the time going on in the world, but to listen to points of view that make you uncomfortable. There are strongly differing views. If we take the Gaza conflict, for instance, the war in the Middle East.
Say the speech, you know, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. Is that a legitimate expression?
Well, no, that is advocating. I consider that anti-Semitic to do that.
But they might say that they don't consider it anti-Semitic.
Well, they might
so
consider
under
that.
your watch, what would be the line?
Well, the Chancellor isn't going to be adjudicating every day on the line, but the line, you have to allow, wherever you can, freedom of speech and expression. Sometimes you have to be generous with those limits, but not advocating violence, not practicing or advocating violence.
But you see the difficulty, right? That is a grey area
course.
where you say that would be anti-Semitic. They would say, well, absolutely not. There's nothing in it that is implicitly violent at all. And so the question then becomes, there are grey areas of speech where people contest the meaning.
Yes.
So for you...
Definitely. There are grey areas of speech. There will always be grey areas.
So Oxford is, you know, a heritage institution in this country and is competing in this globalized economy and arguably, you know, struggling, certainly, when it comes to money. Is that a metaphor for the country itself?
It's also a metaphor for the country in that there's vast opportunity here. Despite all of those things, this is the world leader. Now imagine if we could achieve that in the country as a whole.
Lord Hague, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Oxford Fellows and graduates will vote for the next Chancellor from Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.